All right, Tanya.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're doing well. This is one of the much anticipated sessions in the executive search series that we're putting on. I know I've received lots of notes from members and have shared it with Barker-Gilmore that the membership is extremely excited to hear from them and thankful for their time and participation. I won't go over the bios, but we've got some pretty amazing resources at the table who are on the front lines of conducting executive search, board searches, and just at market leaders on what's going on with the industry. I am starting in order of who I see on the screen. We've got Katie Kristy, John Gilmore, and Sarah Sullivan. And I am going to back out and get out of the way. We all discussed that we think the best way to handle this session is to have it be interactive, but there is a presentation here to anchor to. We'll let them get started and we'll monitor questions in the chat or just raise your hand. Thank you guys so much. Super appreciative.
It, and if anyone has to leave early, by all means, this is going to be recorded and shared in the next couple of days, so we'll have this to document. I actually will lead off real quick and then pass it off to Sarah and Katie, who are amazing. Sarah actually has been with me is almost as long as we've been in business. She's just unbelievable at what she's doing, and Katie's just tearing things up out there. When Tanya asked if we would do this, we quickly jumped in and said, of course. One of the things we're celebrating our 20th year this year, but one of the things that we really believe has helped our success is our commitment to the development of in-house counsel and chief compliance officers. Through executive search and our coaching, we're really looking to help people out. So if you have a specific question, feel free to ask it now. If we don't get to it and you want to have a future consultation, feel free to reach out to Sarah, Katie, or even me, and I'm happy to jump in. But from that said, thank you for having us this afternoon, and Sarah, I'll pass it off to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, John. I'm so glad to be here. Imagine that many of you in attendance have been in your roles for many years, may have, or may be looking for something new, but may not have navigated the executive search process recently. So we'd love to just kind of share some recent findings and observations that we've had. Katie, John, and I spent a lot of our time working with boards and CEOs on these large general counsel and CLO searches. And over the years, what we're seeing is a shift in how boards are evaluating GC candidates. So that's where I think we can bring you particular value, kind of behind the curtains look. But before we talk about resumes or interviews or the search process itself, it'd be helpful to just kind of look at how the role of the GC is evolving, particularly in the eyes of the board and the executive teams. So we'll start with a few market trends that we're seeing across the board. One of them, is I think it's the concept of the general counsel as a strategic advisor is certainly not anything new these days. We've all heard of that. But the what many of the leaders on this call, many of you have been in that role and operating that way for some time in that strategic advisor role. But again, what we're seeing is a change in the breadth and complexity of the issues that are being or that are sort of landing on the general counsel's desk, and the degree to which the boards are and the CEOs are looking to the general counsel to bring a lot of different areas together, and to sort of say this is how we should navigate this. So we're looking at regulatory oversight, of course, cybersecurity, reputational issues are huge these days, government relations, and now increasingly artificial intelligence governance, all of these things intersecting. And again, the general counsel is that one person who's looked to just kind of bring all of that together across the enterprise. And that's, no small task. So in many organizations, the GC is the executive who helps leadership understand, again, how these risks fit together, in particular, what they mean for the business, what they mean for the bottom line, right? And when boards talk about hiring a general counsel today, it's honestly at the end of the process, it's rarely about legal expertise alone anymore. The by the time the candidate gets to the finish line, the pedigree and the law schools and the large law and all that, it's all the same across the candidates. They're all very strong candidates, but it comes down to really three things, I think: judgment, trust, and communication, and how, in particular, how concisely you are able to communicate with the board. And we'll discuss those three areas in more depth later as we talk about, tips and tricks with interviewing, especially. I in particular, you hear these terms: strategic advisor, business advisor, judgment, trust, communication. In this call, I would love to really get granular about those things. What does that actually mean to have trust in someone? How does the board and the CEO, when they're sitting there evaluating folks at the end, candidates at the end of the process, how do they actually decide who they're trusting? So that's what we'll get into a little bit later in the process. Um, Katie, I'll turn it over to you for discussion of regulatory environment.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone. April, do you mind just skipping ahead to the slide we're on currently, just so everyone can keep up? And if anyone has questions, feel free to do so within the Zoom application, and we'll answer questions throughout or at the end too. But nice to meet you. If I haven't already met you in the past, I hope I have the chance to do so after the conversation today at some point. I think all women are super women, but especially female GCs, they're my favorite to talk to. No offense to the men, but I think it's just amazing how women can juggle so many balls at once and never seem to let one drop. So hopefully we have the chance to meet at some point if we haven't already, like I said. But this slide really just highlights what Sarah had said around some of the key trends that we're seeing in the legal market and the shifts that we're seeing and those buzzwords that we're hearing, and the regulatory volatility is definitely something that's coming up regularly. I think with this current administration, there's a new surprise every day. And so that's where the expectations of the CEO and the board are higher than ever. They want to have a general counsel in the seat that's well appraised on all of these regulatory changes. So they're really leaning on the general counsel to keep them informed. What do we need to do from a business standpoint to avoid any unnecessary risk? What do these changes actually mean for our customers or for our business? Some of those things are like trade compliance. I've heard there's a lot of change going on there. Of course, AI governance. If you're in the healthcare space, the healthcare regulatory landscape's evolving every single day. So the job is getting harder, and so I think a big part of it is just staying as on top of this stuff as you can and digesting it and sharing it in a way that's understandable, comprehensible, and actionable for the CEO and the board and the rest of the business partners. So that's a big thing that we're hearing right now. I think, Sarah, you kind of touched on number 3 in your opening. Again, the board and CEO expectations are higher than ever, and that kind of dovetails into number 4. We're seeing turnover in the GC role higher than ever before. So last year alone, 70 of the Fortune 500 general counsel spots turned. And we're seeing more and more confidential searches. We're getting approached to fill more confidential searches because there might be people that have been in the role for a long time and have been valuable enough, but they're not keeping up with the times and becoming that modern general counsel. And the CEO and the board are going to be quick enough to make those changes. If you're not doing more than just the legal work, you really need to be that well-rounded business advisor that you keep hearing everyone talking about. And so I think you're seeing that with the turnover in the GC spot. So the market is dynamic. We are busier than ever. And so that's exciting. There's new opportunity out there. But with that being said, the competition for those roles, the expectations for those hires is also higher than ever. The searches are taking longer because they're not just going to meet with a couple of people and make a decision. They want to do pretty comprehensive interview processes. It could be a number of Zoom interviews, a number of on-site interviews, a lot of we're doing a lot more assessments like the Hogan assessment and other similar assessments like that. They really want to pressure test these candidates in many different situations and make sure that at the end of the day they're making the right hire because they just can't afford to do so otherwise. So that's what we're seeing. Another trend in that vein is that 50% of the GC spots at the Fortune 500 last year, anyways, they came from within. So it's not a huge number that you're seeing getting pulled from the internal teams. They are looking externally. In some cases, they'll consider the internal candidate, but when they're up against someone else that's already done the job and been that sitting GC, been with a company that's of the same size or larger and help to drive the business forward, the competition becomes tricky. So I do think if you are a number two looking to become a GC, even if you're on the GC succession path, never get too comfortable. Continue to just prove yourself in those roles and show that you're more than just that legal expert. But also, I don't think it hurts to keep your ears open for other opportunities externally because from time to time hiring managers will make the decision to bring on a deputy, and that opportunity might come from outside sooner than it will come from within the organization that you're already at. Tanya, did you have a
You
question on that?
see that? I do have a question. So
Yeah.
let's say that we are in the search process and our resume is one of the ones in the stack, albeit placed by a search firm or through the internal talent team at an organization. We all hear network, network, network. Do I make calls? It happens all the time. Hey, I see you're connected to so and so, or maybe you really do have a friend or colleague that's internal to that organization. Is that when I lean into my network? I want you guys to talk a little
That's a
bit
good
about
question.
what
John,
to
I
do
feel
in
like
that.
I'll let you take this one because
Yeah.
you're pretty
Yeah.
passionate about this.
Yes, agreed.
Well, I've had a number. It depends how it's done. So if you just happen to have a friend at another organization and you want to reach out and say, I do, you have to be careful. Make sure it is not a confidential search, because if it is a confidential search, that can land everyone in a lot of hot water. So
Yep.
first of all, if it is not confidential and you see a company advertising and you happen to know someone in an organization, it's worth at least calling and contacting and understanding what it's all about. Here's what I don't recommend. I mean, people love to contact people that they know and say, "Hey, can you put a good word in for me?" And the next thing you know, they're calling the CEO or someone on the board or something. I would just say be very careful. If you can get an interview and have an interview on your own merits, that's the best. That's the best approach. After you go in an interview and you name drop, oh, by the way, I know this person from previous work experience, and then let them reach out to that person. But it puts especially CEOs in a real bad situation where they feel like, okay, now I have to interview this person because of this connection. Just go in and stand on your own merits is what I would say.
Yeah.
But I once had a situation, literally my 38 years, I can tell one story after the next. I had a confidential search. It was confidential because the general counsel had an illness and was going to retire early because of that illness, but no one else besides the CEO and CHRO knew about that. And he reached out to one of his business friends. So this is after signing an NDA with us, of course. Reached out to one of his business leader friends and said, "Hey, I understand your general counsel is leaving and you have a GC opening." Trust me, not only did that candidate not get considered for the opportunity, he was wiped off the BarkerGilmore database. So don't do that. Be careful about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would also add, rely on your recruiter. I mean, at this level, every CLO and general counsel search should be retained. We speak with the hiring manager, the CEO, the board on a daily basis and are able to be your advocate. So it's not a contingency type of situation where firms are up, competing with each other, and you need to be worried that your name won't be thrown in the mix. So
All right. April, you want to skip to the next slide? So some of the topics that had come up with Tanya that might be of interest to the team is just how do we actually show our value as legal leaders and as a legal team. I actually was speaking to a general counsel recently who made a point that I had never heard before. She said that the one of the biggest jobs of the general counsel is to serve as chief marketing officer of your legal team, which I thought again was interesting. I hadn't heard that said like that before. But she's right. I think women especially, we're not always comfortable talking about our accomplishments and highlighting our successes. We can go in the background and you might be doing all of these things, but I think it's worth highlighting those successes, reminding people of those successes. You can't just do the legal work in the background and assume everyone's happy with that. I think nowadays, going back to the fact that they're looking for more than just a legal advisor, you have to be working strategically with the business. You have to be showing the CEO and telling the CEO and the board where legal's value has been and how they're driving the bottom line and how that relationship with the business has helped to turn things around or prevent unnecessary risk or settle something that would have been otherwise bet the company litigation, something along those lines. So I think you can't just rest on your own laurels. You have to make sure everyone's aware of the successes that you've had. And that helps to, we'll get into that a little bit further on, but really build the reputation of the legal department and the general counsel as someone that isn't just that legal advisor.
Yeah, Katie, you just nailed it with that word reputation. The reputation of the general counsel and the reputation of the law department. You need to really make sure you know that reputation. It's interesting. I just interviewing an internal candidate for a position. I asked if the law department ever did send out a survey to the business, and the answer was no. And so they really didn't know. So interesting enough, that person thought the law department had an excellent reputation with the business. Meanwhile, meeting with the CEO and the CHRO, learning that the reputation of the law department was nothing near what the person thought the law department was. So really understanding the reputation, more than showcasing your reputation by putting numbers in front of people. I do think it's wonderful to have metrics and be able to establish those metrics, making sure you're a good manager with your law department. But again, focus on your reputation and really be realistic, understand your reputation. You can't think your reputation is all there. You need to really make sure you're tied with the business and the leadership team to really know, maybe have a 360 done. Our coaches love to do the 360 to really learn your reputation. It's worth its weight in gold to know where you're coming from.
for sure. I think sometimes you don't know what you don't know, right, until you get additional information
Yeah.
specifically. But along with your personal reputation as a lawyer and a leader within an organization, John mentioned there's an incredible focus, and there should be a focus on the reputation of the law department, of course. And I just actually was meeting with a board of a very large, prominent organization, and they're one of their major issues with the outgoing GC was that they didn't feel they had enough visibility into the bench strength on the in the legal team, because it was almost like a bottleneck of information held up with the general counsel, bottleneck between the board and the rest of the law department. And they really wished that he had brought more like his deputy to some of the meetings. They'd like to see more of that actual development. They'd like to know, they want that visibility and that information shared back and forth as appropriate, obviously. But it is, I think, also important in interviews, and again, we'll get into this later, but kind of balancing the I and the we as you're discussing, like using those terms. So saying I led the company's response to a regulatory investigation and built a cross-functional team to manage the process. So you're kind of bringing the team aspect in, but still kind of tooting your own horn that you led the process, right? Like that you did have the responsibility ended with you, of course. So there are some interesting, just I think, ways of specifically describing things in interviews and on your resume that can really help to showcase both your team and your personal reputation, your team's reputation and your personal reputation.
Yeah.
You see the
I
question? Okay, all right.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say we got a question from Pamela Burke, and I don't know if you want to come off, but it says outside of a survey with the business team, are there ways, metrics, in particular that you recommend a GCCLO show that reputation?
I think that that's a good question, and that kind of goes to point number 4 on this slide. And it's tough to measure. It is because it's not a number necessarily that you can put on paper. But I think to the extent that you can show that legal's being pulled into matters sooner than maybe they were historically by the business, that's a good way of showcasing that they trust you and you're able to get things done faster and smarter. And that's really when the perception of the legal department shifts. So that's something that you can touch on, Sarah or John. Anything else you
Yeah.
can think up on
Well,
that front?
certainly EQ. I mean, EQ is something that
Hmm.
really it's a thread through this whole conversation, right? The leaders in these spaces have incredibly strong listening skills. They build relationships. They maintain relationships from past employers and across C-suites at different organizations. They have impeccable crisis management skills where they're able to be calm and cool under pressure. They are incredibly humble. They have this appropriate degree of humility at all times. And I think the one that John, if you've ever worked with John, you'll hear him say this. It's the final one is that they bring optimism to the table. And I think it's so important because it's so opposite of the tower of no that legal can become known as. It's really just bringing to the table this feeling of optimism and this and all through I think that just bleeds down into the law department as well, right?
Well, yeah, I'll jump in on the optimism. Sarah's spot on optimism. People with high EQ are more optimistic than negative. And but what that means to the CEO and the business team is when there is an issue, you have a don't worry, we'll get through this attitude, and you have a strategic approach to how to solve the problem. And nothing a CEO or board or leadership team wants to hear than the general counsel in a crisis situation going, I've got this. And that really earns a lot of trust, and people
Yeah.
really want to hear that. You're talking about measuring soft skills or even understanding metrics. So I mean, obviously there's easy metrics like contracts, number of contracts, quick, how long does it take to turn around, different matters that are on their plates, and understanding, what's getting done and how fast it's taking to accomplish. But it's really I love emotional intelligence. Katie mentioned earlier we do Hogan a lot. We really are believers in Hogan. Our coaches advised us that people with high emotional intelligence make the best leaders and the best general counsel. Calm and cool under pressure, good listeners, good relationship builders, optimistic like Sarah's talking about. So measuring EQ, you can easily measure EQ. It's not a difficult task to measure. I would have everyone on your team with making sure they understand their EQ score. IQ, you're not changing. Personality, you're not changing after a certain age. But EQ, you can always
Yeah.
work on it. And I think that if you have a team of lawyers that work for you that all have good EQ scores, or if they don't have good EQ score, they can work on it to get better. But people like people with high EQ. I mean, they're good people that you enjoy working with. They listen to you, they relate to you, they have good relationships. if you would measure anything on your team, measure your team's EQ score. And if you have someone with low self-awareness and low EQ, that's a signal right there that they're pissing off someone with the business. If someone leaves your company and they have low EQ, you're like, good riddance, thank God they're gone. So if someone with high EQ, they leave your company, you know what you do? You tend to stay in touch with them. So do your teams a favor. It's a very simple, easy test, and it's very much revealing, and it's very much workable if you have someone with low EQ. So that from a measurement standpoint, I would make that a priority.
I think too, like a reduction in compliance issues, that's a clear signal that your reputation is a positive one. Maybe people are coming to you with their issues before they become bigger problems or their reporting goes up. I mean, that's a sign of a good reputation as a legal department. So there's ways to tie real metrics, I think, to just what the reputation of the legal department is in that
Yeah.
way.
Also,
There's ways of
sorry.
doing an engagement score. One thing we love to hear, and it's funny because I hear this quite often from really great general counsel, is they go on to say, my law department had the highest engagement score in the company. And as soon as I hear that, I love the person. So that's a really, really attractive score.
Yeah.
I was just going to jump in there on this. John, you said a lot of what I could have said leading into the call, how I reached out, and you said absolutely. But not only did you say absolutely, you said, I think, Tanya, we also need to bring someone from the coaching team because I think that's a real opportunity for leaders as they're leading their teams. There are a lot of members in the group just because you see the theme of questions that come across where it's clear that we're being asked to measure those things. If I'm sitting in the leadership role, or even if you have a victim mentality, you're like, okay, well, they've got the wrong perception. But like legal is the bottleneck. They're too complex. But I think that is the messaging and the theme you want to know. So if you do a questionnaire out
Yeah.
to or a survey out to your peers, then you know what you need to work on from a brand reputation perspective as it relates to your department or the organization. And it might just be education, but again, we can't sit in the chair and heads down, be technical and proficient. We've also got to be business leaders.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions on?
I do. I see one. It says, can you say more about the assessments that boards companies are using, e.g., Hogan or others? And do the companies drive that as a requirement, or is that a suggestion coming from you? I remember the last couple of jobs I had where I sat in a room and there were things ringing and it
Yeah.
was done, but with psychologists who were sort of interpreting. Talk a little bit about
Yeah.
Yeah.
and
Well,
maybe
A
also
lot of
the internal ones
this is a
in
hot
the
topic on my
yeah,
desk because I just had this blow up this week where
yes,
all
yes,
of a
yes.
sudden all these people. So just so everyone knows, we have our own internal assessment, but we love the Hogan assessment. We think it's very valid. What's going on in the executive search world is you have Korn Ferry, Heidrick, Spencer Stewart, all competing for business, and they're charging major fees. Like a Fortune 500 general counsel, they're charging about $450,000 fee to recruit that person. To justify that amount, what they've come up with is these crazy assessments to basically make the general counsel do everything, including standing on their head to get it. We're talking like 10-hour assessments to determine if the person is going to be a good general counsel. Does it really take 10 hours of psychological evaluation to determine if you're going to be successful? I don't think so. But they're justifying getting the search and their fee by creating this. So be prepared. If you're going to be working with one of these search firms, they've sold the leadership team that this assessment is the magic beans that are going to determine if someone can do the job. Never mind your track record, never mind your ability to influence, never mind your leadership successes. It's all in this assessment. And these assessments will determine if you get move forward or don't move forward. So a lot of CEOs and boards are listening to them, even though they've made a bunch of bad hires after these assessments were made. So it is a major component out there in the executive search world. I really believe it's about justifying the fee and making their process seem like it's more fail-proof than anything else. Katie, I think Katie mentioned they're so afraid of making the wrong decision. It's almost like they're crippled by it. They're afraid to make a decision because they think they might hire the wrong person because the role is that important.
Sarah, I see you leaning in.
I was just dovetailing on what John is saying. We really appreciate, and we do see this sometimes when a client, a potential client, CEO board, um, understands that we are Hogan certified and able to build into our assessment process particular behavioral questions that get to that assess these candidates on precisely what they're looking for. They don't necessarily need to go through an entire 10-hour separate, what you're paying us to do that already and we're effective at it. We have a list of behavioral questions and they're remarkably spot on. When you see and as John was talking about earlier, a lot of them revolve around the identity versus the reputation, what someone thinks of themselves and how they're viewed by others. And that really comes out in the questions that we ask. So
May I ask Katie, were you going to add something there?
I was just going to say, although some of the search firms are really driving that, I do have clients too that like certain assessments. They've always used them. And they'll put you through them. And oftentimes they have their own consultants that will review the results. So oftentimes that's not through us. Sometimes they want us to administer the Hogan assessment ourselves, in which case we will do it. But more often than not, I think they already have the assessments that they want these candidates to go through. They'll send them to them and they'll deal with it on their end. So we don't have too much involvement with the results and reviewing the assessments with the candidates.
Yeah. Don't misinterpret. I'm not saying assessments are bad. I'm just saying it shouldn't take 10 hours and a day or two of preliminary work to get ready for your assessment to determine if you're going to be a good general counsel.
May I ask a question? And I think that and I know this is the coaching session. And one of the questions I would absolutely ask before you guys got off is like when we would call you, when someone would engage Barker Gilmore, and this is a tiny snippet of that, because this question was around what type of assessment to your point, Katie, a lot of people have their own some, like I want DISC or I want, I want Hogan, what have you. And this isn't about what I don't care about that. But do you, if someone calls you and says, hey, look, I want to do a development exercise with my team. Maybe they send that survey out and they get blindsided. Would they call Barker Gilmore to say, hey, look, we need to work on the brand reputation, or I got a team of 30 and 20 or high IQ, but these other ones, I really want to keep them. They are not. Like, would they also call you to help develop the team and
Yeah,
to administer an assessment?
that's where the coaches come in, but it's
Okay.
more of coaching the GC of how to go about doing that. So it's not, sometimes we do work with some of the higher level, maybe deputy general counsel like that, but and we're doing more and more, our coaches are doing more and more of here's a successor that I want to invest in and have a coach. And by the way, what that does is it builds a lot of loyalty. The deputy general counsel feels like, okay, I really do have a chance of becoming the next general counsel. So retention's better, and then they improve their efficiency. So it's a win-win for everyone. But we typically don't go in and coach the individual mid-level lawyers on a team.
Right. Great.
And on April 1st, you'll have every chance to talk about coaches and what they do.
All right. So for this one, we're just going to, Sarah, do you want to kick this off? We'll just talk through the executive search process. I feel like there's always a lot of questions around that. What are some tips and tricks to be most successful working with a recruiter or resume or interviews? So hopefully we give you some practical tips here.
Sure. So a resume for a CLO general counsel candidate, certainly fine. We always get questions about whether it's fine to go over one page. Yes, absolutely. It shouldn't be 12, but I think three, especially if you're including some speech engagement um, data, that's fine. But really, you should strive to keep it simple and professional and polished looking. If we get a resume and it's got a lot of different graphs and sections, and you can't tell how the logical flow of the person's career, it sort of is automatically set aside. It should be, honestly, it should be a clean black and white. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, John or Katie, but I think Times New Roman, it sounds like an old-fashioned font, but it's just sort of the standard font that you look for. And don't want any pictures or colors or anything distracting on it. And you want to focus on your uh, highlight the accomplishments that drove success for the bottom line, right? So you want to speak in terms of, like, you don't want to say responsible for litigation management. You want to say oversaw global litigation and reduced exposure by 40% through blah, 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 proactive risk strategy or something. Just really, again, drilling down, becoming more granular with your descriptions. It's something that we actually see it more often than not, that people just throw out there, oh, managed outside counsel relationships. Well, how about reduced outside counsel spend by 8 million, or be as specific as you can. It really, those numbers jump off the page, and it's important to have every word and comma and period and everything on your resume be correct. And definitely look over, make sure there are no grammatical errors. But the reality is, both recruiters and GCs and CEOs take very little time. We scan, we look for certain topics, leadership topics, transactions you enabled, revenue support, all of that. So it's not, again, it really needs to be able to grab someone quickly and be really well organized and, again, polished.
Yeah. And I think on that note too, once you have a resume put together, uh, oftentimes if we see you paste your full resume onto LinkedIn, that's a pretty good indicator that you're looking for a new job. So if you're trying to keep that
Yes.
under wraps with your employer, maybe don't put the whole thing on there. But I do find recruiters, we all use LinkedIn, and it is the first thing our clients look at too. If we send a resume, a candidate summary, they go to LinkedIn. So I think you should have your LinkedIn look pretty polished as well. Have some of those key accomplishments under each role that you held, and you'll come up in keyword searches more frequently, and it'll look really good when the hiring manager is taking a quick peek at your LinkedIn. And
And
then
don't have the car selfie, the selfie you took in the car or something
Yeah.
like that.
yeah, professional
There's
headshot.
enough
Picture
places to
at
get
the
a
wedding with
great
your
picture
tongue.
taken these days.
Yeah. Tanya, any questions on that?
John has
What
something, and then
Sarah,
I'll pop in with a question.
the one thing with Sarah and Katie mentioned, a lot of people I hear are using professional resume writers. I do like the content that a lot of the professional resume writers are coming up, but the cutesy resumes with the boxes and colors and pictures, do not do that. Also, like if you're going to use AI to put some of this together, everyone knows they don't want to see a resume that was written by AI. You don't want to use the word I. It shouldn't say I did this. It should just say, perform this or manage a team.
Yeah.
And you want to have some specifics, like show where you bring the most value to the organization. General counsel or CEOs, they want to see numbers. Help build this team from a $200 million organization to a $10 billion organization, whatever it is, whatever some of the successes are. But
Yeah.
try to stay away from the resumes that look like they were done by a professional resume writer or through AI. Make it something genuine from yourself.
And this is probably common knowledge by now, but that the double dash, I always forget what it's called, is
M dash.
the
Mhm.
M dash, is a telltale sign that somebody's used AI for their writing. And it's unfortunately, if Katie and I were just lamenting that we actually used to use the double dash and now I don't at all anymore. So that's just something to consider. If you are find to use ChatGPT to, edit or whatever, but go back through and remove those dashes, those double dashes.
My inside comment here is I've never placed anyone in 30 plus years that has a 5-page resume. No one wants a windbag. So make sure that the resume's 3 pages or less, maybe 4 if you need to, but really should be a 3-page at most resume. Definitely more than a 1-page resume, but try to keep it around 3. Um, yeah.
Oh, one question actually I have for you, John, and I'm trying to think through what my answer would be, is we know the importance of indicating if you've made, especially if you've made a number of moves, how you made those moves. If you were recruited by a former colleague or CEO or something to another company, would you add that right to the resume or suggest they talk about that in the interview process
I think
prior?
it's something to talk through and
Okay.
not have it on the resume. One other thing, amazing enough, we just had a candidate get rejected by a CEO because they listed a ton of publications and they thought that person was self-serving for doing so and putting that on the resume. I had another candidate get rejected because they put like 5 or 6 boards. Most of the boards were nonprofit boards that didn't take a lot of their time up, but they saw that, oh my gosh, they sit on all these boards. They're going to have no time for our company. So you think that's all good stuff, but make sure you limit publications and board activity
Selective.
because it can really blow up on you.
Mhm.
There's a question in the chat, and it says, "How far back?" Or in the Q&A, "How far back should you go? And what are your thoughts on truncating or summarizing experience this 20 years ago?" And then I want to add one onto that. That's not a piece of this. How do you end up? So you're engaged by the board or the Cairo or the GC to bring in a senior level person or a successor for board search or a CLO search or GC. How do you end up in the stack?
Mm.
Mm,
Simple formula. Good law school, good in-house or good law firm training, good in-house leadership. That's how you end up in the stack.
yeah.
So to get your resume to the table, it's really having a good track record, showing good judgment, and again that you're talented from that standpoint. I always say it's what's on your resume that gets you interviewed. It's what's not on your resume that gets you hired. So these soft skills that everyone's referring to.
I
For
think
the first part of, oh,
you
sorry, Sarah.
go. No, go
I was going
ahead.
to say for the first part of that question, I've had clients get off put if you are excluding part of your experience from your resume 'cause they feel like you're hiding something. So I tend to think that including all of your experience is helpful. I don't mind if you've had a long career and it's earlier legal experience and it's like a summary of your law firm training or yeah, if you've went to multiple firms before then
Yeah.
and you basically did the same thing at every firm. It was just a different firm. I don't mind listing the firms and a summary of what your experience was there. If you had a lot of experience prior to your legal career, I don't think you need to include much of that unless it's relevant to the search. So, for example, if it's like a healthcare organization and you were a doctor before you went to law school, you might have some sort of tie to the mission of the organization. In that case, it's probably more specific to the case there, but I don't need a whole list of your internships and
A server
marketing
at
career
Applebee's or
prior
something
to
like
your
that.
legal
Yeah.
career.
Yeah.
That's a good
No
comment about
restaurants
combining the
as a
law
server.
firms and just doing a private practice section.
It also
Yeah.
Again,
depends on the number of
if
moves,
it's
right?
going to extend the resume past, the limit we're putting forward, that's a good way to do that.
And
Mhm.
that is another thing, unfortunately, that John's right, that with the strong education credentials, large law firm or reputable law firm, and then in-house. I would also add a fairly clean track record. I mean, it's difficult. It is frankly difficult to place someone who has moved a million times. Um, of course, there are opportunities out there for those candidates, but you really need to be ready to describe why you made these moves. And if it, if it was with a practice group at a law firm, explain that. And but it is a definite ding against a candidate.
Number of moves is something that the executive leadership team definitely looks at closely.
Mhm. In the case that you've been a private equity GC and you've helped grow these organizations and exit them, and through a sale process, your role was duplicative and you moved on. I tend to actually like to see that on a resume, because then it sort of explains, if you have a number of moves, there can be justifications for that in those instances. So I think it's a case by case situation on whether or not you include that in your resume.
Yeah, I think
Um,
the question that just came in was about if you should have a skills section. I'm not really a big fan about that. I mean, we're obviously a general counsel, you're looking for a generalist, but that said, I do like the summary up on top that, public company and private equity portfolio company teams, or, and just talk at a higher level, what your expertise is in a summary section to begin.
I just saw a question come up about whether you should have your graduation dates on a resume. Absolutely. That has actually changed since I started recruiting. It used to be, I think organizations are looking for more experience than less these days. And it's
Mm.
all not have it. I mean, it just, if you don't have them on there, they wonder why they're not on there. And you don't have anything to lose. And at least in my opinion, I think you probably agree, John, that
Yeah.
especially at the general counsel and CLO level, and people tend to move a lot. So if they can hire someone who's going to stay for even 5 to 7 years, they're thrilled. There's so much movement in general these days that
Yeah.
it's just not an issue anymore.
I always insist that the dates for the graduation are on there. There's no sense trying to hide it, and the people want candid people. So just put it, as Sarah said, more experience is better than less. So I ask that all the time. I don't see the dates. What are the dates? They tell me, oh, 1993, and I'm like, you think that's old? That's not old.
Yeah.
uh, well, we can kind of move through these because I know we're getting tight on time, but I think with the career narrative, this is talking about coming up with your elevator pitch to go through your resume when you are in an interview setting. I think one of the biggest mistakes, which we will talk about it as point three here, is talking too much in an interview. We see people do way more than 50% of the talking, and then they don't get the job because that doesn't show good listening skills at all, obviously. So I think with a long career too, it can be challenging to quickly summarize your experience in a meaningful way. But I tend to like when people start from the beginning, at least give a high level overview. If you have law firm experience, I have big law training, corporate associate, and a client of mine pulled me over to so and so. I like hearing the story, so making it a more of a storytelling situation versus just going line by line in your resume and having this part become much longer than it needs to be. So what brought you from one place to the next? If it's I followed a CEO that I had worked with formerly and he pulled me over, or if it was a client of mine, or if someone on the business side had made a move and ultimately started their own business and wanted me to work there. Tell the story and do it in a concise, clear way. Highlight the key impact that you had there. Was it a growth company, teams that you led, who you reported to, and why you moved on, and then move on to the next part of your resume. So hopefully it's
Yeah.
not super hoppy and you're able to keep it concise enough. But practice that elevator pitch, keep it tight, and really show the impact of each role that you had, and why you moved on from one place to the next, if it's meaningful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we just had a very picky CEO that rejected a bunch of candidates because their elevator pitch was so long, and he came back and he said, I'm picturing this person at the end of my board table giving a presentation to the board and going, that would never work, that presentation. So rehearsing it, and it can't sound rehearsed either. It needs to come from your heart, be
Mhm.
genuine. But like Katie's saying, make sure you have it down. I mean, it shouldn't be more than 4 or 5 minutes long, and it should be impactful of where you were able to make the biggest impact to the company.
Yeah.
But
And in an interview, again, at this level, you may be asked to weigh in on a hypothetical um, situation. And the stronger, by far the stronger answers begin with my recommendation would be X, and here are the reasons, versus, oh, there are a lot of issues and blah, 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 and talking through all of the law and then getting to what your recommendation would be. Be concise and get to the point quickly in the beginning. And the general rule is, or the higher you go in the organization, the shorter and more concise your answers should be. So,
yeah,
Yeah.
the new saying out there is, I ask you what time it is, and you tell me how to build a clock. And they don't want that. By
yeah.
the way, we only have 10 minutes left, and I knew this was going to go. So, Katie and Sarah, I'm going to let you guys rush through the end. I do have a hard stop at 2 o'clock, but yeah, I'll let you guys rush through it. We only have 9 minutes left.
Okay, Sarah, anything quickly to add on interview mistakes? I think people like to hear those things, but we touched on a few already.
Can I
Yeah.
also, John, I know you're trying to hop out. In our pre-calls, John gave me trauma and has eradicated a phrase from my
Uh,
vocabulary, and that is, I think. Can you please talk
yeah.
about that?
Yeah, so well, first of all, the question normally is asked this, and I look at this as the same question. The question is, what is your greatest strength? Or where do you bring the business the most value? Now, I say that's the same question because your greatest strength, if you're asked a question, should talk in terms of how you bring the business the most value. People that want to say the low-hanging fruit, I'm a good communicator, I connect well with people, all these things of course you better be doing that because that's what you need to do to get there. The answer really needs to be, mean, how have you brought the most value to the company? And that answer really needs to include how have you helped the company achieve their goals, right? And the way you answer that, the way 99.9% of people answer that is, I think I do this. Now, all through this conversation, we're talking, you need to be humble and genuine. The humble way to answer and brag about yourself is not to say, I think. The way to brag about yourself is say, well, one of the things my CEO regularly tells me is I do this. And again, it's not that you're a good communicator, you're a good leader, whatever. It really is how you're helping them achieve their goals. Maybe that my CEO regularly tells me he's so he our connection is strong because I can come to you with both for legal and business and even non-business issues. Maybe it's just cultural. So anyway, the answer to what's your greatest strength or where you bring the most value is not, I think I do this. It's, well, let me share with you. By the way, I love the word share. Let me share with you what I regularly have heard from my CEO. One of the things the chairman, it's funny you asked that question. One of the things my chairman of the board just recently told me in a meeting is I do this. So that's probably the best way to keep yourself. One other thing too, just because I'm in a hurry. Um, why are you interested in this opportunity? Almost every interview leads off with this. Two greatest mistakes anyone gives, and it happens all the time. Believe me, we put dead hit candidates out there and they get rejected for this. One, they launch into why they're looking for something new. Well, the reason I'm interested is because my company just got bought out by so and so, and all of the leadership team's leaving the company. Again, why are you interested in this opportunity? You didn't answer the question. Or they're generic about it. Well, I'm looking to be a public company GC. You're a public company, so I'm interested. The answer needs to be, why are you specifically interested in this company and this opportunity, and how you know you can bring the value to it. So
That's
those are my
a
two biggest interview
that's a
tips.
really good point. It's why are you interested in this opportunity, not a opportunity? Why not
Exactly.
just any old CLO opportunity?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you guys so much. Super appreciative. There are lots of questions. We can talk about how we handle those offline, but talk a little bit as we close out when and why someone would call you guys. Is it just for legal roles? Is it just for that top job, the GC, CLO, what have you? I know you do board searches. but would it also be for a Chiro or a CFO and or that next line in the legal framework? Talk about when you pick up the phone to call Barker Gilmore and why.
I can take that. I mean, we do search at all levels, legal and compliance. So, and we do some work too in risk. I'm also doing some director of trade compliance searches right now too. So legal adjacent we also do some work there, but we will do CLO roles, we'll do deputy GC roles, and we'll do their strategic reports as long as the job opportunity is aligned with the market from a comp standpoint. You're being realistic about what you're looking for. We'll consider taking on an opportunity for a fifth year attorney that you want to, that's going to this will be their first in-house opportunity that they're taking on. So yeah, we really do it all. And so anytime you have a legal or compliance or legal adjacent need, we're happy to take that on. And we're a national search firm, so we don't specialize in one particular area of the country. We do work across all different industries as well. So we've seen it all. We've done it all from Fortune 500 companies to early stage venture-backed organizations looking to make their first GC hire or build out their legal team. So we've done just about everything. John or Sarah, I don't know if there's anything else to add on that.
One detail to add is that we're a boutique firm and we focus exclusively on in-house counsel placement and chief compliance officer placement. So we will not we don't have any law firms for clients. So
There's
that's
a big difference between the right candidate for a law firm and the right candidate
yeah.
in-house.
And we've
The
really
one
been
the
able
one
to
thing
hone in
too
on our
that
assessment
the
process.
one thing that we do if someone looks for a mid-level lawyer or something like that, is we're putting the candidates through the same lens as if you're looking for a GC, meaning those soft skills. If my recommendation is if you're interviewing someone and your gut says this person
Mhm.
has low EQ, don't hire them.
Yeah,
So, use the same concepts that we're talking about. You need to be a leader in the organization. That's the kind of person you want facing your businesses. And they're the ones when you do hire people like that are going to make you look good. So
exactly.
be real careful. If your gut says this person could be someone with an issue with relationships or talks too much or whatever, don't hire them.
We're often involved in succession planning and building out law departments. So yeah, it's good you
John,
mentioned everything
I'm
all the way up.
sorry, Sarah. John, I know you have to jump, so when you have to, but I'm going to see if we can rapid fire through some of these. Are you seeing any issues placing GCs who are in their 60s?
No, no,
No.
no.
Okay. Okay. Is publishing fractional roles a taboo? I'm presuming they mean LinkedIn or resume.
I think it depends on how long you've been in a fractional role. Sometimes if you transitioned last year, the company sold or whatever it might be, and it's only been a certain amount of time, I do like to understand what you've been up to. If you've been keeping busy, I don't
Yeah.
mind seeing that on there. If it's a number of different fractional roles, I don't need to see all the specifics. I think you can just put something like consulting or,
Whatever.
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
just a
Yeah,
high
one
level.
one other along those lines, I placed a number of women that did that while they were raising their children and then jump back in full time. I think that's great, and so do the clients.
That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
awesome. Okay. Is there a period of time, and I think you addressed this, but I want to make sure, is there a period of time that may be too long at one employer, 10 plus years with increasing responsibilities?
Here's my answer to that question. If you did the same thing for 20 years, yes. One of my favorite interview questions, how have your responsibilities progressed since you worked for the company? If you were promoted 3 or 4 times during that period, fantastic. If you did the same thing for 20 years, you're not a general counsel candidate.
We love to
Okay.
see that progression on the resume though.
Your next job was at your old employer.
Well, again, you could be a great candidate to go in and do the same thing for someone else. But if you're looking to move into the leadership role, you need to show progression
You have
of
to show the
increased
progression.
responsibilities.
Okay. Is there a GC profile? Meaning it used to be you were an M&A attorney that got picked out from the firm that used to work or litigation. Is there a profile anymore?
There's
No.
less of a focus on that now, more of a focus on the leadership skill,
Charisma, leadership,
executive presence.
polish is the
Yeah, I
focus.
think you see really large companies even hiring. I can think
I
of a
have to
few
run.
examples
Okay.
off the top
Thank
of
Bye,
you,
my head.
John.
Megan.
Thank you so
Uh,
much.
I I can think of a few examples where there were really large companies that hired a general counsel that none of us probably would have thought to hire, but because that chemistry clearly existed between the CEO and that individual, they were able to make a huge leap and join a much bigger company in a different industry. So I'm seeing more industry
Yeah, for
shifts
sure.
than I feel like I've seen in the past
For
That's
sure.
recently.
awesome. I want to be respectful of your time, but
Thank
there is
you.
another question that
No,
I will
please go
ask.
ahead.
Is there a difference for older women? There's a theme here, so I can sense that people are feeling sensitive. Is there a difference in what you're seeing for older women versus older men?
That's a good question.
Really? Sorry, you go, Katie, but I'm not seeing that. I think that,
I was gonna say I want to say no, but yeah, that's a good thought. I guess I haven't really thought too
it's,
much about it being a woman versus a male, but I do think what John said earlier, now our clients want more experience and so I don't think there's going to be a bias necessarily woman versus male in that situation. In fact, I'm sure a lot of our clients would love to have a an experienced female GC. So my gut's saying no, but I guess I haven't thought too much about it before
well,
this question. So good question.
probably a topic for an entirely
A whole
new,
session,
new,
Yeah.
but
right?
DEI obviously is a hot button topic right now. But behind the scenes, we haven't seen a huge slowdown in
Let
terms
up,
of
yeah.
companies asking for diversity in their, at least in the slate where they have,
Yeah.
are you Katie?
No,
I
and I think when we
really,
look at our placements, female versus male, there's not been a big shift or big decrease since DEI has been kicked to the side by so many companies. We're not seeing a huge decrease in the number of women that we're placing because we're still putting amazing women forward for these
yeah,
positions, and the best person's going to get the job in the end, which
exactly.
a lot of the times is a woman. So
Because that 100%. One thing we didn't really make it to our AI section, but I've noticed that people at all ages, some are embracing AI, others are not. Definitely, it's something that you can use AI to learn about AI, and it's changing every day. Nobody's an expert because it's all changing day to day, but it's something that really does help you to come across as current and just I would encourage everyone to at least stay on top of the new trends that are coming out and become familiar with it. You may have an AI expert, subject matter expert on your team, but you still may be that the person who needs to explain some things to the board or the CEO. And yeah, stay on top of that. There's no reason not to, really.
yeah. And Barker Gilmore's had about 3 different webinars with our former Fortune 500 general counsel coaches and advisors, as well as current general counsel on this topic specifically, because I think it's just such a hot topic. People are
Sure.
confused about where to start in a lot of cases. And so all of that's free on our website if you want to reference any of those resources. But I think the biggest takeaways from all of those is the worst thing you can do is nothing, of pretending it doesn't exist or it's not happening. That's the biggest risk. You can even use AI to create an AI policy, and it's just all about the governance and showing that you have some sort of control over what's being used internally and ensuring that any proprietary data is not
Yeah.
getting into the wrong hands. So yeah, I think leveraging your resources like this group even and asking around your network, what is everyone else doing? Everyone's in the same boat trying to figure it out, and new things are coming out every day, new tools are coming out every day.
Yeah.
So ask around what's working, what's not working, and I'm
You
sure
don't you
people are
don't
helping.
you don't need to use it for your case law, but you may want to make sure that at least if your company is using it, that everyone's using the same type or that's that it's consistent across the board. So
And most applications these days have some form of AI integrated into it. So again, just creating some sort of AI policy or governance strategy around it and On that topic too, I think just pulling in other people across the organization. I think a lot of times it's the GC is the first person people go to on the matter. What's going on with AI? How are we keeping this under control? Or what's our strategy there? But it's not just on your shoulders. I think pulling in cross-functional partners, the CISO or risk or whoever else across the organization that it makes sense to pull in, create some sort of council on the matter, and have the team that's working on the AI governance strategy, and you're not
Yeah,
in it alone.
exactly.
I love John. I love what you guys do here. In our call beforehand, one of the things he mentioned is that a candidate that you guys had, and you knew that they had experience with AI, pretty good experience, and they went into the interview and they never brought it up. So that person fell out. And, when you did the post-mortem, it was like, well, they never brought up AI. So I think that's another good nugget. It's really nerve-wracking to be in that seat, but that's one of the things that's sort of table stakes right now. And I know we're 6 minutes over. There is a question here, and I'll just summarize it to say, the question seems to be if, I am truly a GC, but then I took a lower level job just to sort of stay in the game. Have I now sort of, put myself in that second chair, or would I be a viable candidate to get back to that
Oh
GC?
no, I think that happens a lot. You see one company merge or acquire another, and the former CLO may stay on in a deputy role. I have a couple of people, candidates in the mix like that with that kind of arc right now. I guess it depends. It depends on whether you need to have a good, a credible story, I guess, so that the recruiter and the hiring manager and the CEO and everyone at the company understands. But no, I don't necessarily think that tanks your ability to secure a CLO search in the future, or search in the future by any means. And in fact,
I
it's a
agree.
good story that you want to get back to that level.
I
Absolutely.
think if you were a GC for a smaller company and you want to move up to become the GC of a larger company, a lot of our clients look for people that have experience with similarly sized companies. So it might even be a strategic move in some cases to leave the GC spot with a smaller company for a deputy spot with a much larger company, because the road to becoming GC of a larger company in that case might be easier actually in a lot of cases. So I've seen it before. I don't think it's a disadvantage.
Sarah and Katie, thank you guys so much. I appreciate this.
Hey, it was so fun.
There's a lot of time that went into this. I appreciate you guys. What I would say is connect with them through all of the channels. I highly suggest you sign up for the Barker Gilmore, webinars and things of that nature. And I'll let you guys close it out. There is a question on how long is too long. I'll lob that out over the fence at you and then let you guys bark it out. But I'm eternally grateful.
Oh, thanks,
Oh,
Sonia.
thank
Yes.
you. Thank you for
I just
having
wanted to
us.
say for anyone in their 50s, 60s, or even 70s, that like just have confidence and go for it. I think especially with women right now, there's a feeling of like your life is just getting started. And if you want to continue your career, have at it. And you saw all of us nodding immediately. It's just not a big deal. The age issue is not, as I said, I've seen that change since I started recruiting even like 20 years ago or whatever it was. So I'm encouraged by that.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having us on it. Was there a question that I missed on? Was it
It was
the
how
gap?
long is too
Oh,
long to be in
hmm.
transition? Yeah.
I don't think there's any perfect answer there because it depends on the client. I think once you start hitting the 1 year mark, that's
Yeah.
when take time off. You deserve it in a lot of cases with these transitions. It's after a,
Yeah.
it might be a grueling deal that you finally got across the finish line and you just need the space, and that's totally fine, and it happens and people do it and it's no problem. But I think once you start hitting that 1 year mark, um, you start to ask questions like, well, have you tried to get a new job?
Right.
It starts, yeah, I
And
would say
that
around the 1 year mark is when you should maybe start considering what's next.
and that really means you need to start looking at the 6 month point. I agree. I don't like to see over a year. Take a few months off and
Mhm.
relax or do whatever you need to do, and then start looking at that 4 to 6 month point because it could take, we know it can take a few months to
Okay.
secure your next role.
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Avril. Here's the contact information. You can find this team easily. Sarah, Katie, thank you so much. Please extend the thank you to John and Avril, you two, for putting all of this together. And thank you guys, the membership, for these great questions.
Thank
Yes, thank you
you.
for
Thank
having
you.
us, and
Appreciate you
definitely feel free to
guys.
reach out.
Okay,
Bye.
will do. Bye bye.
Bye.